Welcome to Book with Joys. This is not another pep talk about positive thinking. This is a conversation about the voice inside you, the one that criticizes, controls, and questions everything you do. The inner critic. 4 years, it's been running the show. You've tried to silence it, ignore it, or outwork it. But what if it never meant to harm you at all? What if it was just afraid? In this full-length episode, we'll explore how to talk back to your inner critic with compassion, how to understand its roots, respond with truth instead of shame, and transform it into your greatest ally. This is a journey of self-awareness, emotional rewiring, and gentle leadership. Take a deep breath. You don't need to earn peace. You're here to remember it. Everyone has an inner critic, that relentless voice that says, "You're not doing enough. You should be better by now. You always mess things up." For some people it whispers. For others it shouts. But no matter how it shows up, it shapes how you see yourself, how you perform, and how you connect with others. Now we'll explore why your inner critic exists, where it comes from, and how to start responding differently. Not with more self-judgment, but with compassion and understanding. Because the truth is, your inner critic was never born to destroy you. It developed to protect you. Let's unpack how fear disguised itself as discipline, and how you can begin to lead yourself with awareness and kindness instead. What is the inner critic, really? Psychologically speaking, the inner critic is the internalized voice of fear and control. It's the part of your psyche that constantly evaluates, corrects, and compares. Its purpose? To keep you safe from rejection, failure, or disapproval. In other words, your critic isn't evil. It's adaptive. It learned, very early in life, that love and belonging often depended on performance. So it took on a job. Keep me in line so no one gets disappointed. Keep me perfect so no one leaves. That voice, the one that says, "Be better," or "Don't embarrass yourself," is your nervous system's attempt at emotional survival. But what once protected you now prevents you from feeling peaceful. How the inner critic forms, and why it feels so real. Every critic has a story. It's born out of early emotional experiences, the moments when love felt uncertain, or when mistakes led to shame. For example, a parent who was hard to please, a teacher who rewarded perfection and punished failure, a community that equated worth with productivity or image. From those patterns your brain concluded, if I can control myself, maybe I can control how others treat me. So the critic became a strategy. A voice that warns, corrects, and scolds before anyone else can. Over time, it stopped sounding like protection and started sounding like truth. That's why it feels so believable. Because it sounds like you. But it's not you. It's a recording from your past, playing on repeat every time you feel vulnerable. The inner critic and the brain. Let's make this more practical. Neuroscience shows that the inner critic is closely tied to the amygdala, the brain's threat detection system. When you experience perceived danger, emotional or physical, the amygdala triggers fear-based responses. To your brain, criticism, rejection, and failure feel like threats to survival. That's why you overthink every social interaction. You replay mistakes for hours. You procrastinate on your goals because the risk of not being good enough feels unbearable. Your inner critic is trying to protect you from emotional pain. It just uses shame as its alarm system. The difference between guilt, shame, and the critic. To heal your relationship with your inner voice, you need to know what you're dealing with. Guilt says, "I did something wrong." Shame says, "There's something wrong with me." The inner critic amplifies shame until it feels like identity. This distinction matters. Guilt helps you learn and repair. Shame paralyzes you. When your inner voice crosses from behavior feedback to self-attack, it's no longer guiding you, it's punishing you. That's when compassion becomes a necessity, not a luxury. Common forms of the inner critic. Your critic might sound different from someone else's, but most fall into recognizable patterns. 1. The perfectionist. Pushes you to meet impossible standards, terrified of making mistakes. 2. The pusher. Convinces you that rest equals laziness, that your worth equals output. 3. The comparer. constantly measures your progress against others, equating value with external validation. 4. The protector. Keeps you from taking risks so you won't be embarrassed or rejected. 5. The guilt tripper. Uses morality and self-blame to control your behavior. You should have known better. Each of these voices has one motivation. Fear. The fear of not being enough, not being safe, not being loved. Recognizing which one dominates your inner world is the first step to loosening its grip. Why you can't silence it. Many people try to overcome their critic with positive affirmations or motivational self-talk. But if you don't understand why it's there, that rarely works. Here's why. When you fight or suppress the critic, you're confirming its fear, that it needs to fight harder to be heard. The voice grows louder not because you're weak, but because it's trying to protect you more fiercely. The solution isn't to silence the voice. It's to update it. You teach it that the danger it's predicting is no longer real. You replace panic with presence. You move from self-attack to self-leadership. Self-leadership. The new relationship. When you're a child, your critic runs the show because it's the only voice that feels safe. As an adult, your work is to step into leadership, to become the calm authority your inner critic never had. This means learning to say, I hear you. I know you're scared. But I'm safe now, and I'm capable of handling this. Self-leadership is what turns inner chaos into inner clarity. It's not about erasing fear. It's about showing fear who's in charge. Reframing the role of the critic. Instead of seeing your critic as an enemy, start viewing it as a messenger with bad communication skills. What is this voice trying to protect me from? For example, if it says, you're going to fail, the real fear might be humiliation. If it says, you're not enough, the real fear might be abandonment. Once you decode the fear underneath, you can respond with precision and care. That's how you build a dialogue instead of a war. Emotional triggers and the critic's activation cycle. The inner critic doesn't appear out of nowhere. It's triggered. Here's a simple breakdown. 1. Trigger. Something challenges your sense of worth, a mistake, criticism, rejection. 2. Reaction. Your brain detects threat and activates the inner critic to prevent more pain. 3. Shame spiral. The critic attacks, your body tenses, and you withdraw or overperform. 4. Temporary relief. You comply, work harder, hide more. The anxiety drops temporarily. 5. Reinforcement loop. The critic learns that attacking works. Breaking this cycle starts at step 2. Awareness. The moment you can notice your critic instead of obeying it, you interrupt the loop. That's the foundation of emotional regulation. How to recognize your inner critic in real time. Awareness takes practice. Start by noticing these signs. You feel a sudden drop in confidence after a small mistake. You replay conversations and fixate on what you should have said. You hesitate to rest because you feel unproductive. You feel shame after saying no or setting a boundary. These aren't signs of failure. They're signs of old protection mechanisms trying to keep you safe. Instead of judging them, meet them with curiosity. What is this voice trying to prevent right now? The inner critic versus the inner guide. You don't need to get rid of inner voices. You need to rebalance them. Where the critic judges, the guide supports. Where the critic fears mistakes, the guide values growth. The critic says, you failed again. The guide says, you learned something important. The critic says, don't even try. The guide says, let's take the next step together. Over time, with intentional practice, your guide becomes louder. It's not magic. It's neural rewiring through repetition and safety. The science of compassion. Research from self-compassion pioneer Dr. Kristin Neff shows that people who practice self-compassion, instead of harsh self-criticism, are more resilient in the face of failure, less prone to anxiety and depression, more likely to achieve sustainable goals. Compassion isn't a soft concept. It's a skill backed by evidence. It regulates your nervous system, lowers cortisol, and increases motivation through care rather than fear. That's what makes talking back with compassion so powerful. It rewires the threat response at its root. Practical reflection. Spot the fear beneath the voice. Here's a useful self-awareness tool. When your critic speaks, pause and ask 3 questions. 1. What did I just feel threatened by? 2. What is this voice trying to prevent? 3. What truth can I remind myself of instead? Example. Critic says, "You embarrassed yourself in that meeting." You reflect, "I'm afraid of looking incompetent." You respond, "Making mistakes is how I grow, not a reason for shame." The goal is not instant calm, but gradual reconditioning. Every gentle response weakens the critic's urgency. From self-defense to self-dialogue. You can't heal what you refuse to understand. And you can't understand what you keep attacking. Talking back with compassion is not weakness. It's emotional intelligence. It means saying to the critic, "I understand you're scared. But I'm here now and I'll handle this." That's how self-trust begins, by proving to yourself that safety no longer depends on perfection. Inspiration. What happens when the voice softens? As you begin this work, something remarkable happens. The same voice that used to sabotage you starts to shift. It becomes quieter. Sometimes it even becomes helpful. Because when fear feels safe, it transforms. You stop living in constant self-surveillance. You begin creating freely again. You start resting without guilt, speaking up without apology, and setting boundaries without panic. You begin to see. The critic was never your enemy. It was your frightened younger self, still waiting for someone to say, "You're safe now. You're still loved. You can rest." That someone is you. In part 1, we explored how your inner critic formed, as a voice of fear that once tried to keep you safe. But understanding that isn't enough to quiet it. You need to know how to talk to it, in a language it understands. And that language isn't logic. It's compassion. In this part, we'll learn how to turn judgment into dialogue. You'll see why arguing with your critic doesn't work, how to listen beneath its words, and how to respond in ways that transform fear into safety. Because the moment you start responding differently, your entire internal world begins to shift. Why talking back changes everything. Every time you respond to your inner critic, you're shaping your brain. If you respond with fear or agreement, "You're right, I am a failure," you reinforce the pathways of shame and self-doubt. But when you respond with compassion, curiosity, and truth, you build new pathways. Ones that associate mistakes with safety and growth instead of panic. This is what neuroscientists call neuroplasticity, your brain's ability to rewire itself through repeated experience. So talking back to your critic isn't just emotional work. It's biological reprogramming. You're teaching your mind that you no longer need fear to survive. The old way. Fighting or collapsing. When the critic attacks, we usually do one of 2 things. We either collapse, believing what it says and shrinking under the weight of it. Or we fight back, yelling at it internally, saying things like, "Just stop, I'm fine, leave me alone." But both reactions feed the same system. If you collapse, the critic wins. If you fight, you confirm its belief that there's danger, that it has to keep yelling to protect you. The alternative is not to fight or flee, but to talk. To enter into conversation. Calm, firm, compassionate. That's how you move from emotional reactivity to emotional leadership. The critic's real intention. The inner critic may sound harsh, but its intention is rarely to hurt you. It's trying to protect you from something it perceives as dangerous. Humiliation, rejection, failure, or loss of love. Imagine this. You're about to speak up in a meeting. Suddenly, a voice in your head says, "You're going to sound stupid. Don't embarrass yourself." At that moment, your inner critic isn't trying to insult you. It's trying to protect you from the sting of being judged. It remembers the times when speaking up led to ridicule, so it warns you by attacking you first. The problem is that it doesn't realize you're not that child anymore. You're capable now. You can handle mistakes. You can recover from embarrassment. The critic is still living in an old emotional era, and your job is to gently bring it into the present. The 3-step method. Pause, name, reassure. Here's a simple and powerful way to do that. Pause, name, reassure. This is how you shift from reacting to leading. Step 1. Pause. The moment you hear that critical voice, "You're not good enough. You always mess up. You should have known better." Stop. Don't try to argue. Don't try to justify. Just breathe. That pause gives you back control of your awareness. It's the difference between getting swept into the current and standing on the shore, watching the waves. Step 2. Name. Then, name what's happening. You might think, "This is my perfectionist voice," or "This is the scared part of me that doesn't want to be rejected." Naming creates separation. You stop being the voice and start observing it. For example, if you make a small mistake at work and instantly hear, "You're so stupid, how could you miss that?" Pause and think, "Oh, that's the critic. That's the part of me that's afraid of being seen as incompetent." Just this naming changes everything. It turns chaos into clarity. Step 3. Reassure. Once you've named the voice, speak to it gently. You could say, "I know you're trying to protect me from making a fool of myself. But I'm human. Mistakes are allowed. I'm safe." At first, it might feel silly to talk to yourself like that. But remember, you're not talking to logic. You're talking to fear. And fear doesn't understand facts. It understands tone and reassurance. This is how you reparent yourself in real time. A real-life example. Speaking up without fear. Let's bring this to life. Imagine you're about to give a presentation at work. You've prepared, but your heart races. The inner critic chimes in. "You're not ready. You're going to forget everything. They'll see you don't belong here." Here's how you could respond. You pause and take a slow breath. You name it, "This is my inner critic. It's scared of being humiliated." Then you reassure it, "I know you're trying to keep me safe. But I've done the work. I can handle whatever happens. It's okay to be nervous." Almost instantly your body softens. Your shoulders relax. Your breathing deepens. You haven't silenced the critic. You've soothed it. That's self-leadership in action. The brain on compassion. Here's what's happening inside you when you do this. The inner critic triggers the amygdala, your brain's alarm system. It senses threat, emotional or physical, and prepares you to fight, flee, or freeze. When you respond with compassion, you activate your prefrontal cortex, the rational, calm, adult part of your brain that governs empathy and problem-solving. This neural shift literally quiets the amygdala, lowering stress hormones like cortisol. So, compassion isn't just emotional. It's biological. It's how you move from survival to safety. Every time you respond this way, you're rewiring your brain to associate imperfection with calm, not danger. Finding your trigger zones. Your inner critic doesn't appear at random. It has favorite places to hide, emotional trigger zones, that activate whenever you feel your worth is being tested. For some people that trigger is mistakes. For others, it's criticism, comparison, or conflict. For example, maybe you spend hours replaying an awkward conversation, thinking, "Why did I say that? I sounded so dumb." Or you scroll through social media and hear, "You'll never be as successful as them." Each of these moments is a doorway, an opportunity to pause, name, and reassure. You can even start tracking your triggers. Write down the times your critic gets loud and what's usually happening. Patterns will emerge, and awareness will give you choice. When compassion feels fake. At first, talking kindly to yourself might feel unnatural. Maybe even embarrassing. You might think, "This doesn't feel real. I don't believe it." That's normal. Your brain is used to self-criticism as its main survival language. You're teaching it a dialect it's never heard before. So instead of judging the awkwardness, notice it. Tell yourself, "Of course this feels strange. I'm doing something new." With time it becomes natural. Just like a muscle, compassion strengthens through repetition. You'll find that eventually, kindness feels more natural than cruelty ever did. The power of reframing, with examples. Reframing is one of the simplest and most effective ways to shift how your critic affects you. Imagine you spill coffee on yourself before a big meeting. Your critic says, "You're so careless. You always mess things up." You pause and breathe. Then you reframe. That was an accident. Everyone makes mistakes. I can laugh about this and move on. Or imagine you receive no reaction after sharing something online. The critic whispers, "See? No one cares. You're irrelevant." You pause again. Then you reframe. My worth doesn't depend on how others respond. I shared something that felt honest to me. That's enough. Or maybe you procrastinate on a big goal and the critic attacks. You're lazy. You'll never change. You could reframe it as, I'm not lazy. I'm overwhelmed. I can take one small step instead of shaming myself. Each time you reframe, you teach your brain to choose curiosity over condemnation. When the voice is too loud, there will be days when the critic feels louder than reason. When no amount of logic or kindness seems to work. In those moments, don't force positivity. Ground yourself in your body. Try this. Sit or stand still and take 3 slow breaths. Notice your feet touching the floor. Notice your shoulders releasing tension. Say quietly to yourself, I'm here. I'm safe. This voice is scared, but I'm listening. Grounding in the body reminds your nervous system that you're not in danger, even if your mind is shouting that you are. Curiosity is stronger than judgment. Whenever the critic speaks, meet it with curiosity instead of resistance. Ask questions like, where did I learn to talk to myself this way? Whose voice does this remind me of? Is this belief still serving me? For example, if you notice that your critic sounds just like a parent, teacher, or old boss, it's not a coincidence. It's your nervous system replaying the earliest templates of safety and belonging. Once you recognize that, the voice loses power. It becomes a story you inherited, not a truth you have to obey. Let's walk through another example in full. You post a creative project you've worked hard on, and no one responds. The critic jumps in immediately. That was stupid. You're not talented enough. No one cares. Pause. Take a deep breath and notice the shame in your body. Maybe your chest tightens or your stomach drops. Name it. This is my critic. It's afraid that being ignored means I'm unworthy. Then reassure it. I know you're scared. You learned that attention equals love. But that's not true anymore. I'm proud that I created something honest, even if no one noticed. That's courage. In that moment, you shift the entire energy of your internal world. From panic to peace. You're no longer the frightened child needing approval. You're the calm adult giving it. The long-term effects of compassionate dialogue. When you practice this consistently, something profound begins to happen. First, your critic becomes less reactive. The time between trigger and response gets longer. You start to notice, oh, that's my old pattern, instead of drowning in it. Second, your emotional resilience grows. Criticism, rejection, and failure stop feeling like personal annihilation. They become normal, manageable parts of growth. And third, your sense of self-trust deepens. You begin to believe that no matter what happens, success or failure, love or loss, you will meet yourself with care, not cruelty. That's what emotional safety looks like. Being your own safe place. Reflection practice. Here's a reflection you can try tonight. Think of a moment this week when your inner critic got loud. What triggered it? What did it say? And what was it trying to protect you from? Now, imagine you could go back to that moment and speak differently. What would you say to yourself now, from the place of understanding you have today? For example, if your critic said, you're behind everyone else, you might respond, I'm not behind. I'm on my own timeline. My journey doesn't have to match anyone else's. If it said, you're never going to get this right, you could answer, it's okay to learn slowly. Growth isn't proof of worth. It's an act of courage. Write these down. The goal isn't to erase the critic but to translate its fear into clarity. The transformation. From fear to leadership. Over time, this practice changes everything. You begin to realize that your critic never needed to be silenced. It needed to be led. It needed someone wiser, calmer, and kinder to step in and say, I hear you, but I decide what happens next. That's self-leadership. That's maturity. And that's the foundation of real self-worth. Not just knowing you're enough, but guiding yourself like someone who believes it. Your inner critic will keep showing up. That's what it's built to do. But now you know how to meet it differently. You can pause. You can name it. You can reassure it until fear turns into trust. Now it's time for the final step of this healing journey. Learning to transform your inner critic into your inner ally. Because the goal isn't to get rid of that voice entirely. It's to help it evolve. When your inner critic softens, it creates space for a new voice. Calm, confident, and grounded. That voice doesn't shame you for struggling. It supports you while you grow. That's your inner ally. Today, we'll explore how to build that inner ally. The part of you that replaces punishment with guidance, fear with truth, and pressure with purpose. Why the goal isn't silence. It's transformation. It's a common misconception that healing means never hearing the inner critic again. But silence isn't the goal. Integration is. Every part of you has a purpose, even the ones that sound harsh or anxious. The inner critic is simply a messenger carrying outdated information. When you understand its message and respond with compassion, you transform it from an attacker into an advisor. Think of it like this. When you were young, your critic was a child soldier, fighting battles for your emotional safety. But now you're the adult. You can take the weapon from its hands and say, "Thank you for protecting me. I'll take it from here." That moment, when fear steps aside and trust takes the lead, is the moment you begin to live as your own ally. From control to care. Your critic has always used control as its main strategy. Be perfect. Work harder. Don't stand out. It believes that control will keep you safe. But your ally uses care. It knows that love, not fear, creates true stability. Imagine two internal voices. When you make a mistake, the critic says, "How could you be so stupid?" The ally says, "That didn't go as planned, but we can learn from it." When you procrastinate, the critic says, "You're lazy and undisciplined." The ally says, "You're overwhelmed. Let's start small." When you feel anxious, the critic says, "Stop being so sensitive." The ally says, "This feels hard right now. Let's breathe through it." The words may sound simple, but the energy behind them changes everything. One voice leads with fear. The other leads with understanding. And the more you practice responding with the second, the quieter the first becomes. Building self-trust. Self-trust is the foundation of your inner ally. It means believing that you can handle discomfort, mistakes, and uncertainty without abandoning yourself. When your critic is in charge, you're constantly on trial. Did I do enough? Did I say the right thing? Do they still like me? But when your ally is in charge, you no longer need external validation to feel secure. You trust your own intentions. You know that even if things go wrong, you'll meet yourself with care, not condemnation. Here's a real-life example. Imagine you forget an important appointment. Your critic immediately says, "You're so irresponsible. You can't get anything right." Your ally, however, says, "That was an oversight. You've been juggling a lot. Let's reschedule and find a system that helps you remember next time." One response fuels shame. The other builds responsibility without self-attack. Over time, that shift creates a sense of internal safety, the kind that no amount of external approval can replicate. The inner dialogue of an ally. Your inner ally isn't unrealistic. It doesn't tell you that everything's fine when it isn't. It tells you that you're fine even when things aren't. Here's what that sounds like in action. When you fail, it says, "That didn't work," but failure doesn't define your worth. When you feel insecure, it says, "It's okay to feel unsure, everyone does sometimes." When you face rejection, it says, "That hurts, but it doesn't mean you're unlovable." When you're tired, it says, "You deserve rest, not as a reward, but as a right." Your ally doesn't sugarcoat reality. It reminds you of your strength within it. That's what separates comfort from compassion. Comfort avoids pain. Compassion walks through it with you. The science of encouragement. Psychologically, encouragement activates the dopaminergic system in the brain, the part responsible for motivation and reward. Fear-based self-talk triggers cortisol and adrenaline, leading to anxiety and avoidance. But supportive self-talk increases dopamine and oxytocin, the connection chemicals, creating calm focus and emotional resilience. This means that when you encourage yourself kindly, you're not just feeling better. You're literally optimizing your brain for success. So the next time your critic says, "You're not trying hard enough," try responding, "I'm doing my best with the energy I have today," and that's progress. Your nervous system will start associating self-kindness with forward movement instead of stagnation. From self-control to self-leadership. The critic controls. The ally leads. Control says, "Do it right or else." Leadership says, "Let's find the way forward." When you lead yourself, you're not motivated by punishment but by vision. You hold yourself accountable without shame. For instance, if you miss a personal goal, the critic might say, "You have no discipline." Your ally says, "I see you're disappointed. Let's look at what got in the way and adjust." Self-leadership isn't about being lenient. It's about being constructive. It treats mistakes as information, not identity. This mindset doesn't just make you kinder. It makes you more effective. Because fear may push you for a while, but trust sustains you for a lifetime. Forgiving the voice. You can't become your own ally without forgiving the part of you that wasn't. That means releasing resentment toward your inner critic. It's easy to hate that voice. It's caused pain, anxiety, self-doubt. But underneath it all, it was just trying to protect you. It didn't know another way. Forgiveness doesn't mean you agree with it. It means you understand it. Think of it like forgiving a frightened child who lashed out because they didn't know how to ask for help. When you forgive that voice, it no longer needs to fight for control. It finally gets to rest. You don't have to erase your inner critic. You just have to thank it and set new boundaries. A visualization. Meeting the critic with compassion. Let's try something together. A short inner exercise. Close your eyes for a moment. If you're listening to this on audio, you can pause and come back to it later. Picture your inner critic as a younger version of you. Maybe a child or teenager, trying so hard to do everything right. See their tense shoulders, their nervous energy, their need to prove themselves. Now, imagine approaching them. You kneel down to their level and say, "I know you've been working so hard to keep me safe. But you don't have to do that anymore. I can take care of us now." Watch how that younger version of you softens. That's what happens inside your nervous system when compassion meets fear. You integrate instead of fight. This is how the critic becomes an ally. When you fall back into old patterns. Even when you practice this consistently, there will be days when the critic takes over again. That doesn't mean you've failed. It means you're human. Healing isn't about never falling back. It's about noticing faster and recovering sooner. When you hear the old voice say, "You're behind," or "You should have known better," recognize it for what it is, a reflex, not a revelation. Then gently remind yourself, "I know this voice. It's old. But I know a new one now." That simple recognition is what progress looks like. Not perfection, but awareness with compassion. Practicing encouragement in real life. Let's talk about how to apply this practically. Say you've been avoiding working on a project because you're afraid it won't be good enough. Your critic says, "You're procrastinating again. You're never going to get anywhere." Your ally, however, steps in and says, "I know you're scared it won't be perfect. But progress matters more than perfection. Let's just start for 10 minutes and see how it feels." That small reframe transforms paralysis into movement. Or maybe you've just had a conflict with someone you care about. The critic says, "You always ruin relationships. You should have just stayed quiet." Your ally says, "That conversation was hard, but it means you cared enough to be honest. You can repair this if you need to." You start to see, encouragement isn't denial, it's truth spoken with warmth. Reclaiming worth from performance. The critic measures worth by performance. It says, "You're valuable when you succeed, behave, please, or achieve." The ally sees worth as inherent. It says, "You're valuable because you exist. Success is just expression, not proof." Imagine how different your life would feel if you truly believed that. You'd rest without guilt. You'd pursue dreams without fear of failure. You'd stop chasing value and start living from worth. This is the foundation of sustainable confidence. Not inflated ego, but grounded self-respect. Building daily practices for your inner ally. Your inner ally grows through repetition. Here are a few simple daily ways to strengthen it. 1. Morning check-in. Before starting your day, ask, what does my inner ally want me to remember today? Maybe it's, you can handle challenges with grace, or rest counts too. 2. Gentle accountability. When reflecting on your day, replace, what did I do wrong? With what did I learn? 3. End-of-day compassion. Before bed, thank yourself for one thing. Even something small like, I showed up today, even when it was hard. These small rituals reorient your inner world around kindness instead of criticism. Over time, they build an internal home where you can rest. What it feels like to live from worth. When your inner ally takes the lead, life feels different. Not perfect, but peaceful. You stop rushing for approval. You start acting from alignment. You make decisions that feel right, not just safe. When challenges arise, you don't collapse under them. You hold yourself through them. You stop needing constant reassurance from others because you've learned to give it to yourself. That's emotional adulthood. When love isn't something you chase but something you become. The inner critic will always exist. It's part of being human. But the relationship can change forever. It's no longer the voice that rules you. It becomes the voice that reminds you of your values. It becomes thoughtful, not threatening. It becomes your ally in growth instead of your enemy in shame. Every time you pause before reacting. Every time you respond with compassion instead of cruelty. Every time you remind yourself that you are safe and enough. You're rewriting the emotional language of your entire life. That's what it means to talk back to your inner critic with compassion. Not to silence it, but to bring it home. You've just completed the episode, How to Talk Back to Your Inner Critic Without Losing Yourself. If you've listened this far, it means you've already started the work. The quiet, invisible, powerful work of becoming your own safe place. Remember this. The critic learned fear to keep you alive. But the ally learns love to help you live. So let that voice of love lead now. Softly, steadily, bravely. Because you were never meant to fight yourself. You were meant to come home to yourself. Continue your journey in permission to be enough. The book that inspired this episode. Thank you for listening to Book with Joys. I'll see you in the next episode. Subscribe, like and share for more episodes from Book with Joys. Healing, self-worth, and emotional freedom.